Hello, my name is Alexei. I would like to make a video about 1 Corinthians 11. But before we read 1 Corinthians 11 and I'm gonna, interpret it, let's read 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 13. For we are not writing to you anything other than what you read and understand, and I hope you will fully understand. Basically, what it's saying is that it should be easily understood, and it should have been easily understood in the first century to the people who all spoke Greek. And originally, the whole letter of Paul would be read in front of the whole church without stop, because there was no chapters or verses in original. It was just a letter sent to the fellow believers. But today I think its biggest problem is that either translation or not knowing first century culture. So let me read 1 Corinthians chapter 11, starting at verse 1. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Now I command you, because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions, even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is your husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head veiled or covered, I would say veiled, dishonors his head. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. For if a wife will not cover or veil her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man was not made for woman, but woman for man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. As woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman, and all things are from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, is it her glory? For her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. Well, let's go line by line. By the way, so let's look at a couple of commands, like be imitator of me. Is that a command, or is that, is that cultural? Like, you don't have to do it. It's it's Corinth. Is that cultural, or is that actually a command from the Lord? I would say it's a command. Be imitators of me, as I am of Christ. It's a command. Now I command you, like praise you, because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I deliver them to you. So he actually applauds them for keeping, maintain the traditions even as I deliver them to you. So it's also a positive note. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. And of course, I would say every man does not every single man in this world. I would say every man who is truly in Christ, because we know that there's a false converts. There's, I would say, mostly is false converts within Christendom, because many shall enter the broad way that leads unto destruction, and few shall enter the narrow way that leads to eternal life. So every man referring to the true believer, not every single person in this world, as we know that Christ is not the head of Muslims. Christ is not the head of every Hindu. But continue on. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. By the way, if you believe, by the way, big question, do you believe this statement, the head of every man is Christ? Like I said, it that every true believer, the head of every true believer is Christ. Is that just a man-made tradition that Paul commands, or is that actually eternal? Next, the head of a wife is your husband. Is that just a traditional thing for the first century, or is that eternal? And the head of Christ is God. And I understand there's lots of talk about is that Christ did about eternal submission of Christ to God, or now when Christ is in glory and is no longer in the flesh, does he still submit to God? And I would say that in Book of Revelation seems like there is no longer like submission, that Christ is no longer submitted to God the Father, because now they're equal and Christ is in glory, just like before he became flesh. Like in Book of Isaiah, and Isaiah saw God, and there was cherubim and seraphim, and it seems like to me that's as soon as Christ ascended into heaven at the right hand of his Father, there's no more submission, but now it's equality within Godhead. But I would say that this one referring to the Christ state in the flesh, where he was submissive unto the Father in his first coming. But continue on. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head veiled dishonors his head, but every wife who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled dishonors her head, since it is the same as if her head were shaven. And for it, I decide to demonstrate by bringing a hat. So the question is this: do you believe that veil or covered, like veiled or covered, is that referring to the hair, or is that referring to head covering? I would say veil. I don't have a veil, so for it, like veil like this one, for example, or veil like that, for example. So the question is this: if this is just a hair, this verse makes zero sense, I would argue. So every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head, so I would actually have to take this thing off. However, if you believe that the hair, if the hair is the head covering in every single thing, but we will get to actually verse, I would say, 13 through 16 actually does talking about the hair, but verses, I would say, 4 till, where is it, 4 till 8, that's actually referring to the head covering, veil. So let's just say, think of this, if you truly want to argue that the verse 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teaches not up to till 9, I would say 4 till 10, actually, yeah, 4 till 10, I would argue that's referring to the head covering, like hair, something on his head, or veil, right? Like this one, for example. That's then you have to actually, if you believe this is the same as the verse 13 till the end, then you have to cut off your hair, because every man who who prays or prophesy with his head veiled or covered, because English translators decide to translate like that, dishonors his head. But every woman, every wife who prays or prophesies with your head unveiled dishonors your head, since it is as the same as if her head were shaven. So he's comparing, like, look, if a wife don't wear this while she prays or prophesies, she would be bald. Think of this. If you don't have this head covering right there, that's as if you're this lady right there with your head shaven. If you have no this, then you just like that. You're bald. You look like what's called the I don't know, butch. They call I think they call them butches, like women who look masculine and stuff. So next, verse 6, for if a wife will not veil her head, then she should cut her hair short. It's quite simple. This sentence right there, it's quite simple. Let me read this again. For if a wife will not cover or veil her head, then she should cut her hair short. So if she doesn't have this veil right there, then she should just cut her hair short or shave. Like, if you don't have head covering, veil like this, either get a haircut to get this or that. Continue on. So let me read verse 6 again. For if a wife will not cover or veil her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. And now the question is this. So if it's disgraceful to cut her hair or shave her head, if it's disgraceful being this right there or this, what's the solution? Don't be like this, but cover your head, put a veil on. So so let me read this sentence again, verse 6. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought not to cover his head. By the way, if you believe that um, if you believe that hair, like I have hair, you have to every single Christian man has to be bald if the hair is the covering. If you're consistent with your theology, all men. Oh, I didn't put this picture on. I thought I did. Yeah, but basically, you have to be bald. You have to cut off your hair completely if you want to be consistent. Since he is the image, but I would say the cover is veil or head covering, however you want to say it. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man was not made for woman, but woman for man. Once again, it's going back to all the way to Genesis chapter 1, to the original creation, the purpose for man and for a woman. Verse 9, neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. Once again, he reiterates Genesis 1, that woman is the helpmate to a man. Verse 10, that is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, because of the angels. By the way, if you believe it's a man-made, think of this. If you believe that this is a man-made tradition just for the first century, you have to, like, if you, in order to be consistent, you have to deny that there's angels. Like, if you say that, hey, Paul commands this because of the man-made tradition, first of all, like, Christ condemned man-made traditions. And you have to deny the existence of the angels after whatever time you think it was just a culture. So I would say verse 10, that was the last time Paul is talking about head covering. He identifies, now notice, he's identifying this as a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. So from now on, verse 11, now he's going to change the topic and actually going to focus about hair. That, hey, ladies, do not shave your head. Just wear head covering. But let's continue. So now he identified veil or veil as a symbol of authority. Now he's going to change the topic. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman, and all things are from God. Judge for yourselves, is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. By the way, verse 16 is just horribly translated. But let's go back to verse 11. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman has made from man, so man is now born of woman. So now Notice he talks about Genesis 1, where woman was made from man, like God took Adam's rib and made a woman out of it. So now, so man is now born of woman. So after the fall, you have Cain, Abel, Seth. So now man is made from woman. And all things are from God. Is that also culture? Like, would you argue for this half, and all things are from God? Is that cultural or not? I hope not. I hope it's not cultural. I hope it's eternal. Verse 13. Judge for yourself. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with your head uncovered? By the way, uncovered, now he's talking about hair. Is it proper for a wife to be bald like this or have the short hair like that? It should be obvious. Of course, if you've been bombarded by TV, just watching all those Hollywood people who are dressed like prostitutes, and man is no longer a real man, it's just look like a trainee or something like that. Of course, you might have your conscience trained, but I believe if you're truly born again believer, Holy Spirit will change your mind, change your conscience. Slowly but surely you will grow in holiness and hatred for sin and love for good. And good referring to what God calls it good, not what culture or you personally think is good. So, judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered or without hair? Of course not. It should be obvious. Like, does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is disgrace for him? Yeah, if a man wears a long hair like this guy right there, should be disgrace for him. Absolutely. Continue on. But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. So he explains it like, look, ladies, don't cut her hair off totally. So, and the last sentence, interesting things that translators butchered that sentence completely in English. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. Or if anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. Some translations, they're almost like, hey, don't worry about it, it's all good. Like, imagine, he commands you, like, how many times? He commands you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I deliver them to you. Then he explains about that the head of every man is Christ. He explains about that, and notice clear commands. Where is it? If it's just for a man ought not to cover his head. Like, it's a command, ought. Just count, like, once again, go by through this whole thing again and count how many times he tells you command. Paul commands you something. And imagine, like, all of a sudden, verse 16, he's like, hey, don't worry about it. We have no such practice. Don't worry about it. It would be such a confusion. But guess what? God is not a is not author of confusion, but of peace. So, verse 16. By the way, for this specific passages, I actually went to preply.com, and actually I've been taking classes for a very long time now. And you can actually learn Greek from Greeks themselves, not from American professor who can even read one chapter in Greek, or some of them they don't even know proper pronunciation of alphabet in Greek, like alpha, vita. It's not beta, it's vita. Gamma, not gamma. It's actually double g when it's make it hard. G. So, but the point is this: on this website, you can find bunch of tutors who actually know not just modern Greek, but also ancient Greek. Notice, I'm instructor of ancient and modern Greek. So, and of course, some of them may be pricey, but sometimes you can be somewhat lucky, and if it's like $10, sometimes you can get somebody who's actually also knows not just modern Greek but also ancient Greek as well, but you gotta be lookout for them. So, going back to the text, so verse 16, yep, verse 16. Actually, I usually don't use Google Translate because sometimes it's actually a mistranslates, but I talked to two different tutors. One is from Athens, other one is from Cyprus, and all of them says this. It's pretty much the closest. If he tries them, he's quarrelsome. We do not have such a habit, nor do the churches of God. Basically, like I said, how my two tutors explained, that if you are against this head covering, against veil, or against, men having short hair, women have long hair, you are the one who is quarrelsome. You are the one who is contentious. And guess what? We have just this one practice. Nor do the churches of God. We have just one practice right there, a veil or head covering, however you want to call this. And if you're contentious, chill out. We have just this practice right there. Because, like I said, I looked them both up, and it's really hard to translate into English. If anything, I would actually go with, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. If anything, because imagine, he commands them, and in the end, verse 16, all of a sudden, never mind, guys, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. So, anyway, also, if you don't have time to study the Greek, the real Greek, we're not talking about this, like I said, fake Greek, fake Erasmus pronunciation. You can just buy interlinear Bibles, and you can be just fine. Buy like this interlinear Bible, but you're gonna need strong concordance for that, or this one right there, have concordance and interlinear Bible within it, or you can get on blueletterbible.org and go through it, or you can download this eSword right there, and you get interlinear Bibles. You're gonna get with some concordance, and you're gonna get like different commentators from it. So I hope it's been helpful, and that's it. Have a nice